this is the time and place for the public hearing on item number 1 on your agenda for minor exception number 2017-01. If you wish to address the zoning administrator regarding this item, please file a request to speak form with the secretary. Comments are limited to 3 minutes unless an extension of time is granted by the zoning administrator. And members of the public will have an opportunity to speak once the public hearing portion of the meeting is open. The action of the zoning administrator, myself, is final following consent of the Planning Commission unless an appeal to the Planning Commission is filed with the planning manager within 10 days from the date of the zoning administrator's action or unless set for public hearing by the Planning Commission. And at this time, I'll request staff make a presentation of this item.
Could you please speak a little bit louder? My husband cannot hear you clearly.
I certainly can. I am happy to speak as loud as needed. Is that better?
It is better.
Okay. Very good. Okay, so I just covered some procedural matters, the most important of which, and I'll reiterate, is that the zoning administrator's decision is final unless the Planning Commission, following the consent of the Planning Commission, or unless an appeal to the Planning Commission is filed with the planning manager within 10 days from the date of the decision resulting from this proceeding. And at this time, I'll ask staff to make a presentation.
Good morning, thank you. My name is Vince Fergoso, and I will be sitting in here for Holly Soboleski. She's out today, so I'll be making a presentation on staff's behalf. As far as the project itself, it's a minor exception 2017-1, which is a request by Mr. Michael Ness to allow an exception from our current fence ordinance. And the property location is 1904 North Heliotrope Drive, and it's a 17,000, almost 18,000 square foot lot. The property is listed in our historic register as a landmark property. That's some site background. The actual request itself is to allow a 5-foot fence to be constructed, where our code currently allows a 3-foot fence to be built on a non-arterial street. Heliotrope is a non-arterial street, and therefore 3 foot high is the maximum allowed by our current code. And the way to get an exception from that is through this minor exception process, public hearing that you hear at this morning. So that's some background on the fence. So let me talk a little about the fence itself. It's supposed to be a 5-foot high fence that's going to be designed to be compatible with the architecture of the house. The house is Italian Renaissance style house, and all the materials and style will reflect that type of style of the house. It will be compatible with the design of the house. Our recommendation here is for this project is approval of the minor exception to allow a 5-foot high fence for a couple of reasons. One is privacy, and the second is usable backyard. I'll give you a little background on our rationale behind that. If you're familiar with the site, you'll notice that the house and the garage are both set back quite a ways to the back of the property, whereas most houses, the houses are set towards the front, and you have a usable backyard. In this situation, there's a very small area in the back, which pretty much precludes the applicant from having a really a private yard. So by allowing them to put up this 5-foot high fence, it essentially transfers the private backyard that most people enjoy now in this front yard. The fence itself is not going to be on the property line. It's going to be actually set back about 4 feet from the two side streets, which I believe is Heliotrope and Santa Clara, I believe was the other one. 19th Street, 19th Street. So it won't be right on the property. So as you're taking a walk on the sidewalk, it won't be right there on top of you. And then on the corner, it won't be right on the corner, but it'll be curved around their little tree and entryway they have over there. So it will not be right there on the street. So again, our rationale for approval is due to giving the applicant some privacy, while at the same time giving them a usable yard to have and enjoy as part of their property. The fence itself, we took a look at some other ordinances beside the zoning code. We have our chapter 13 of our design guidelines, historic structures, and found that this fence will still allow a view shed, a view corridor into the house. As you know, the house, it's a very tall Italian Renaissance style house, and the 5-foot high fence will not block the visibility of this historic structure. And again, the design and material of the fence itself will be designed to be compatible with the house, and that will be consistent. So for those reasons, staff is recommending approval of the applicant's request for the 5-foot high fence. That concludes my presentation. I can answer any questions that you may have.
Yes, thank you. At this time, I'll invite the applicant to speak, and if I have any remaining questions, I'll ask the applicant or staff to fill in any blanks before we open the public hearing. Good morning, sir.
Good morning.
If you could please just state your name for the record.
Michael Ness. I'd like to wish everyone good morning. And
And I'm happy to hear any presentation you may have, or any representative that would like to speak.
Yeah, I would just like to start out with, an apology about the construction fence, the overextended, use of the construction fence. We had planned to get it up the day we moved in, so we could kind of move in, in privacy and just get settled in, and then design the wall and have it built and have the fence down between 3 to 6 months. The design took a long time because of the historic nature. We spent a year and a half restoring the interior of the house. We had photos of the original living room, kitchen, and we restored it to, in my opinion, museum quality. But you just can't put a wall up because you want to put a wall up. It has to, our whole thing was we wanted the wall to look like it was built when the house was built. So we brought architectural details from the balustrade and porch and out to the front to authenticate this. And, it took a dozen trips up to Pasadena taking photos, researching it. We hired a designer who specializes in historic properties. She helped us along the whole way with the interior. And it took much longer, so I apologize for that from the gate. I know that kind of sparked a little bit of the heat that has occurred. But I thank you for clarifying that the hearing today is not about whether we can or cannot build a wall. I could get permits today to build a 3-foot wall. And the exception is for the height. And somewhere along the line, through the neighborhood, it got heated and, but we have tried to be very respectful and sensitive to the area and the neighborhood. We raised our kids in this neighborhood, and that's basically it, yeah.
I'll speak as well.
Certainly, as a representative of the applicant.
Sure.
As a representative of the applicant, you're welcome to speak. Again, I'd ask for your name just for...
Yes, my name is Catlin Meininger. I'm a historic design consultant. My main specialization is 1920s and 30s homes. I work with the Gamble House on a lot of homes on the Mills Act, including ones by a lot of noted architects, Frank Lloyd Wright, Wallace Neff, George Washington Smith. So and I've worked on several houses with the Nesses, who are one of my favorite clients because of their devotion to preservation and to making things look appropriate for the structures that they live in. This particular house, I think it needs to be said, is very distinctive from the other homes in the neighborhood in the way that it's situated on the lot, which you spoke to, but it's raised, it's elevated higher. The scale of it is very grand, which is why it's so wonderful and noticeable from the street. And the entry is neither on one street nor the other. It's really at the corner and has that sort of sweeping walk straight up to the doorway, which in designing this wall, we wanted to kind of keep that look and keep everything uniform. There are allowances to build the wall higher on certain places, but the house, we felt needed the symmetry of something to be consistent along the sides. And we specifically, after a lot of thought, and part of having that fence up was to see this, we could have requested a 6-foot wall or whatever. The 5-foot was specifically chosen for the way it lined up with the balustrades. When you stand across the street and you look at it, that 5-foot mark allows you to see the pots atop the balustrade that are there, and it just looks very graceful with the house. So yes, it creates a space for them to use the yard, to allow their pets out there, and use that front yard, which makes up a huge amount of the property. But it also, as you can see in the rendering, the house is still very visible, and nobody wants to hide the house. There's also, if everybody has time to look, there's a picture of the house in the 30s, and there was not a wall around it, but there were giant trees obscuring almost the entire house. So so if we're talking about keeping it original, it was not originally completely open and visible. So I think, all of those things are important to note. It's just distinctively different than just in its scale and its height above ground and the way it's situated to the street. By curving the wall inward too, I think we alleviate any real conflict with sight lines at the corner. And I think it looks beautiful, personally. And it keeps, part of the property sort of open. Anybody can walk around that tree in the front. I just think, the length, we want to make sure that the plaster, for anybody asking about or concerned with the makeup, the columns would be exact replicas of the ones that are on the balustrade on the front of the house. The plaster would match the way that it's troweled on the house and was originally done. And all of those things are really important. We've gone as far as talking to people about trying to replicate the old aggregate of the sidewalk in the driveway. So all of these details are a reason why this process has taken a long time, but I think it's to ensure that it'll always be a landmark of the neighborhood and a really beautiful house that everybody, including, the occupants, can enjoy.
I just say one thing, and what she just said, I just think, like I said, we could do the 3-foot one, and we're always like, that's going to be disastrous for this house. Well, last thing we want to do is make it not as beautiful as it is, and that's why we came up with the 5 feet.
And speaking
It's
to that
really
real
the
quick,
scale.
it's just that if you were to put a 3-foot, which I understand is standard for a lot of the houses, with that house and the way it is raised up, the foundation is raised and it's oriented, I believe that a 3-foot wall would look kind of like a mere curb and just a weird decorative, curb to I just don't think it would be balanced with the scale of the house.
Thank you. In looking at the renderings, which I'd like to note for the record that will be part of the record of proceedings for this matter, there's a large poster board with a proposed rendering of what appears to be the wall. Is that correct?
Correct.
And then there's also three smaller renderings. So I'd like to note those. You mentioned briefly the surface of the wall. It's going to be a plaster. The house itself is a plaster
It is
siding.
stucco. Mm-hmm.
And the color will match.
The color will match the house. Mm-hmm.
And it appears as if there's at the intersection of the wall and the front of the house, there's some columns. How tall are those where the gate attaches?
Where the gate attaches, I believe they go up to 7 feet, which I think is, I may be wrong, but I think is allowed as gate posts.
Because of
no
the
matter,
setbacks.
Yeah, because of the setbacks.
That's 30 feet in.
No matter if we went
the-
down to
from the
3
sidewalk.
or not.
And those posts they're in the front of the house, and they also on the garage side.
Driveway.
On the
gate?
garage
Yeah,
driveway
so it's
side.
4 total.
Correct.
Okay. And the perimeter of the wall, is there an existing wall in the rear of the property?
There is in the rear of the property just
Okay.
a block wall.
So it juts out. Well, the
You know,
situation of the property is somewhat unique. I'd like to know where the new wall starts and ends. I know there's some plans in the staff report, but they're a little small.
Actually,
Perfect.
yes.
Okay, perfect.
Sure. Here, one of these. Are you? Actually, there's no reason for me to.
So I'm looking at a rendering of the proposed wall, and it looks as if the wall connects to the garage on, if you're looking at the house, on the left side of the property, and comes out to, I believe it's 19th Street,
Yes.
and then heads east along the property,
Correct.
well, 4 feet in from the property line, correct?
Yes.
And then curves in to match the existing curved walkway, and then continues along, is it Holloman Drive?
Heliotrope.
Heliotrope
Yeah.
Drive, to the, again, to 4 feet to the property line?
Correct.
On
Yes.
the north side, and then continues, it looks like it's even with the easternmost portion of the house. Is that about right?
Yes.
Correct.
Okay. And it looks like there's some extensive landscaping that is proposed along the exterior of the
This
proposed
is
wall.
an artistic, rendering. We haven't completely figured out exactly what that landscaping will be, but even the plantings we know that we do want to do some historic older plants that would have been popular at the time period, as well as stuff that is easy to maintain so that it's always beautiful. We'll have irrigation systems in the front to make sure that that's always attractive out in front. But again, I mean, the idea of putting that you could move the wall back and build a higher wall and have a whole stretch of planting is something that they could do, but wouldn't, be as beautiful or.
Touching briefly on the proposed setback, is it your opinion that by moving it out towards the property line, it corresponds more with the visual aspect of the house?
You mean by having it here as opposed to another
opposed to-
6 feet back?
Correct.
Exactly. I think, and also if you move it back, no matter how high, whether you do a lower wall or a higher wall, because of the slope and the grade that it sits on, that's going to be even higher. The closer it gets, the more of the house it would obscure.
And this is a question either for staff or the applicant. The grade of the property has been referenced several times. Is there some sort of grade percentage or frame of reference that would note from the street level? For example, if the lot were, if no grade existed on the lot, a 5-foot fence would be 5 feet in relation to the house. But because of a grade, does this wall appear smaller than it otherwise might with relation to the structure itself?
I would have to say, yeah.
I don't have the grade exactly, but I do know that it varies from about 16 to over 2 feet, almost 3 feet in places where the house is elevated.
The house sits on a concrete foundation that is basically a porch around the whole house, which is approximately 3 feet above the ground of the street level, which is higher than any house in that whole neighborhood. The house is very unique.
I do have a photograph that I can send you that might, I don't think, Holly had that, but I don't think it's included in here, where you can see the foundation. Let me see if I can get that to you.
Sure.
To
And
illustrate that.
the staff report references the grade. Is staff's opinion consistent with what the applicant has stated?
Yes. And just for clarification, we measure the fence height from the curb level.
Correct.
So.
Correct. Mr. Ness, I don't know if you're currently residing in the property or not. it looks like there's a walkway, and I'm not exactly sure where your property line is. I imagine it comes out to include the curved portion of the sidewalk that's immediately in front of the house at the corner. Have you experienced any pedestrians, going across the street, across the lawn area of the property, or do they typically stay to the sidewalk?
They typically stay to the sidewalk, but we did purposely keep that corner and that tree, open to the public as just kind of being sensitive to the,
Sure. And for staff, I know that 19th Street is not considered a secondary arterial or anything like that in the general plan. What's the pedestrian or vehicle traffic on that road?
The actual traffic counts.
I don't need the traffic counts, but
No.
compared to the rest of the Floral Park area, is it a heavily trafficked area?
Oh. Probably not any more than any other street in there. Flower gets some traffic over there. Santa Clara gets some traffic. 19th Street, I believe, is a connector from
It is.
Broadway.
It's-
So maybe a little bit more than a typical street would there,
But not excessive.
but not excessive.
The house itself, my understanding, and again, this is for staff, the house itself is listed on the city's historical register, but not the property. Is that accurate?
The house and property
It
all
is.
get wrapped up in the same designation.
And is Floral Park itself designated as a historical district, or is it structure by structure?
Floral Park is not. It's structure by structure, but we do consider Floral Park to be a historically sensitive neighborhood. So we take special care when we take a look at projects in that neighborhood.
Can you give me a little bit of context as far as several of the public comments that again we'll note for the record following this portion of the hearing? Reference the openness of the thoroughfare and the sight lines. What's the prevalence of, as both the applicant and staff has stated, a 3-foot wall is permitted by right.
Correct.
What's the prevalence of 3-foot walls, and to the extent any walls or it's also my understanding that shrubbery in the area is also limited to 3 feet.
Correct.
The extent of compliant, for lack of a better term, privacy shading, so 3-foot walls or 3-foot hedges, and any variances or non-compliant structures that currently exist, just to get an overall sense of the neighborhood.
So you're asking how many properties have fences in there for one?
Not by a
person?
number, just
The percentage? 10% maybe? Maybe 10%?
so it's not the rule, but it's not.
Not the rule, but everybody has the ability to
Sure.
to install a fence. As far as compliant, any fence built from 2000 on has to be 3 foot or higher. Prior to then, they were allowed to go a little bit higher, and those are no higher. 4 foot high was
Excuse
before.
me, just to keep decorum, everybody in the audience will have an opportunity to speak and correct any. You may ask a question and to correct any perceived misstatement, but for order of proceeding, I appreciate the galley being silent. Thank you. You will have an opportunity to address it during the public hearing. Thank you.
Prior to 2000, our fence requirement was 4 feet high in residential properties. In 2000, the city council passed an ordinance that said if you're on an arterial street, you can be 4 feet high. If you're on a non-arterial street, 3 feet high. So it changed in 2000. So they were lowered as of 2000. So there may be some taller fences in the neighborhood that were built prior to 2000.
Okay. Thank you both for responding to my questions. I might have a few more after the public comment portion.
Excuse me.
Yes.
Did you want to see the image of the foundation?
No, it's okay. Just
so you
because it's
get the
not
idea.
visible to the public.
Okay.
I
Okay.
think the point has been made that staff and the applicant are representing that the foundation of the structure itself is somewhat raised in relation to the street and other properties in the vicinity. So at this time, I'll ask the secretary if we've received any written communications. I know I've been forwarded several, but I'd just like for the record to state.
All written communication has been distributed.
Thank you. And I have reviewed those written communications. There were several. There were comments both in favor and against the proposal. I would say that the majority were against. At this time, I will open the public hearing. During this time, it's the city's rules of procedure limit public comments to 3 minutes. So staff going to be keeping track of that time. Once we hit the 3-minute mark, I'll ask you to summarize or wrap up the comments. It looks like we have several people who'd like to speak. So for efficiency, we intend to hold you to that. It is requested that you submit a public comment card so that we can note who spoke on this matter for the official record of proceedings. So I'll go in order of the comment cards. These are not necessarily in order received, just the order that they've been compiled. Eamon Garcia.
Garces.
Hi,
my name is
please.
Eamon.
If you could come forward and I don't know if we have a chair that can be positioned and a microphone. Thank you. And I apologize in advance for butchering names. You will not be the first, sir,
Okay.
or the last.
Oh, so my name is Eamon Garces. I'm a physician at St. Joseph's Medical Center and St. Jude Medical Center. I live at 1901 North Heliotrope, which is directly across the street from the proposed project. I passionately disagree with a lot of things that have been presented here. I'm definitely not in favor of this project for a number of reasons. First of all, 19th Street is a very heavily trafficked street, so there's safety concerns here. My house sits every bit as high. So it has the same setback, and we have plenty of usable space in our backyard. It's a very similar lot. From an architectural standpoint, I think this is a disaster. If you look at this particular corner, it's a very historically significant corner. Every style, revival style, is represented in this corner. Our house is an English Tudor. The owner's house is Italian Renaissance. Across the street would be Spanish. And then the house remaining across the street from us is Art Deco. All of the houses are completely open, and they have large setbacks. Setbacks are very similar. So if you're walking right down 19th Street, you have a wonderful symmetry. The houses are open. I think walls are built for one purpose, to privatize and to keep people out. They send a message that's a very unwelcoming message. It's very much sort of, this is our property, we want it to be private. It's not that, it runs very counter to the culture of Floral Park, which is very open, very neighborhood friendly. Everybody knows their neighbors. It's not Cota de Casa, it's not Beverly Hills. We don't have compounds. I mean, everybody has very open houses. So there's a number of reasons why I think this is an extremely bad idea. Frankly, I'm sort of shocked at the Historic Register and the Historic Commission's response to this. This is a landmark property, which then gives it a higher designation in the historic sense of things. To put a 5-foot wall around it, you will not see a lot of the historic and architecturally significant parts of the property. You will not see the balustrades. You will not see the opening of the entryway, because you'll have a large gate in front of it. So, and from my standpoint, I've been looking out my living room window at a green fence the last year and a half. I will now be looking at a 5-foot wall, which is directly around the corner from 17th Street, which frequently the buildings on 17th Street are graffitied. If you put 150 foot of wall, that's a beautiful canvas for all the local graffiti artists. I guarantee it will be graffitied regularly. Walls also create a sense of not being a safe community. There's other walls in the neighborhood where when you're walking, people don't necessarily want to walk close to the wall. They would prefer to walk on the other side. A 5-foot wall is a 5-foot wall. If you're going to be right next to a 5-foot wall, it's going to be 5 feet. The business of whether or not this is set back or not really is irrelevant. So, I mean, these are my concerns. You know, I think Floral Park is a special area. When our house burned down in 2008, we made every effort to put it back to original condition.
If I could ask you to summarize, sir.
Okay. At any rate, Floral Park's a very significant area locally. It's an area where we are basically the caretakers of these homes. This home has been there for 85 years without a wall, and I think it should continue without a wall.
I do have a quick question with reference to, you know, and I appreciate your description of the area. It's very helpful. The nature of the openness, et cetera. You do understand that a 3-foot wall could be constructed.
I understand that perfectly, and there's a 3-foot wall going up on Victoria.
Okay.
And,
so your concerns, if I could summarize, would be the 24-inch difference as opposed to whether or not a wall is there.
Yeah, it creates a significant aesthetic difference. It's almost double, and I think we should really understand that. And it creates. I mean, a 3-foot wall is not a privacy wall. 3-foot wall is a decorative wall.
Okay.
A 5-foot wall is now a privacy wall, and that's keeping people out.
Right. Thank you, sir.
Okay, you're welcome.
Patricia Tornell.
Hello, my name is Patricia Tornell, and I live at 1717 Heliotrope Drive and have for the last 42 years. Floral Park's so unique as far as neighborhoods go because it's not a neighborhood of estates or a neighborhood of compounds. It's a very diverse neighborhood. There are small homes, larger homes, but everyone gets along there. And it's a wonderfully open neighborhood. And I have a question. Is this house covered by the Mills Act?
Yes.
How can any change be made to the exterior of this house, including a wall, if it's covered by the Mills Act?
Well, before I purchased the home, I made a call to the city because it was important to me. And I was told by the city that as long as the house is not itself touched, we want you to be able to live your lives the way you want to live your lives. If you want to build a wall, you're legally allowed to.
If I may briefly interrupt, just for purposes of procedure, I welcome the public to ask questions. I would prefer the responses be given after the 3-minute speech, so there's not a dialogue back and forth.
That's another question.
We'll note your questions and provide
My
responses.
question is the Mills Act. That changes the entire nature of that property by putting a 3-foot fence or any fence. It really doesn't need a fence because, number one, the buyer knew what the backyard was when he bought it, and if it wasn't big enough then, he might have considered a different area. Also, as Mr. Garza said, it's a decorative wall if it's 3 feet. And another question I have is the meaning of the word minor, as in minor variance. To go from a 3-foot wall to a 5-foot wall is a 66% increase. That does not sound minor to me at all. I'm 5 foot 2 inches tall, and I walk by that green fence that was up there every morning with my neighbor, and it is literally blocks everything. It's an eyesore. So I am very much opposed to it, to any fence around that property. It should stay the way it was when it was built in 1931 because it is a showplace of Heliotrope Drive. And one other thing I would like to say is the house, 2 houses north, has a compound wall up, which was put up by Marjorie Floor before I moved in. And I really didn't agree with that, but it was a 2 double lot. And now to have a fence 5 feet tall built on the corner, we have one neighbor who is sandwiched in, walled in, can't even see past straight ahead. There should never be 2 properties boxing someone else in. I mean, that's just un-American. So that's the end of my presentation.
Thank you. And I'll provide a response to your question on the word minor variance, and I'm sure the Assistant City Attorney can correct me if I misstate it, but my understanding of the code is that it articulates and defines what minor variances are, and among those are variances in the height of a foot or wall as well as setback requirements. Is that correct?
Yes, minor exception.
Very good. Okay. Next we have, thank you, Patricia, Eugene Andrews.
Yes.
Welcome, sir.
Thank you. My name is Eugene Andres. I've lived in Floral Park for 46 years. I've always looked at this house as one of the premier houses in Floral Park. And Floral Park, as most of you know, is a unique place. Within the last 2 weeks, we just completed our 25th home tour, where between 1,000 and 2,000 people show up, pay $35 to tour the houses. We had 9 houses and 4 yards on the tour this year. It's been very successful for the neighborhood. People don't come to look at walls. They come to look at houses and yards. And to turn one of the most magnificent houses in the neighborhood and put up a big wall so the occupants can have a private yard, I think is inconsistent with what should happen. In your report, I noticed on public notifications, there's an entry that said that the president of the neighborhood association was contacted and the president did not identify any concerns at this time. He's here, he can speak to that, but I was contacted personally by the Gallavans who live next door to this property, and I informed them that the neighborhood association does not get involved in disputes between neighbors. That's really a city issue, and we can't take a position on that. So as far as I know, I've been on the board for a year and a half, and this issue has never come up. And if it had been, I think we would have demurred because we cannot take a position. Also, tonight I'm chairing a group that's deciding what is the best yard in Floral Park to submit to the city. And by wiping out the front, the way I see it, the front of this particular magnificent house, by putting up a wall, I think is inconsistent with what we're trying to do by identifying yards in Floral Park. I would ask that the city revisit the issue of whether or not any wall can be put up on this property if it's a Mills Act property. Because I think we'd all like to know, I understand the city says you can't be higher than 3 feet since 2000, but under the Mills Act, is it really appropriate to put up any wall around this property, more or less a 5-foot wall? I'll leave you with that comment. Thank you.
The Mills Act question, and this is for staff, has come up at least twice now. In taking a look at and you can point me to the right section if this isn't it, but it's Chapter 30 of the Municipal Code, and it talks about referring the matter to the Historic Resources Commission if there's an alteration to a historic structure. Has this gone to the Historical Society? And if not, is it on grounds that it's not technically an alteration to the structure itself?
For the fencing, they cannot block the view shed, as what they call it, and the Historical Resources Commission did weigh in on what the view shed means.
Okay. And that bears on...
The Mills Act agreement requires that you do not block the view shed of the property, and the Historical Resources Commission did look at what the definition of view shed meant.
What does it mean? What was it?
That you don't completely block or obliterate the view of the property.
If we could keep some decorum again, those individuals yet to speak will have an opportunity. I appreciate the passion that folks have about their community. I'm not intimately familiar with the area, but as a longtime resident of Southern California, you can't not be somewhat jealous of those who live there. So back to the Assistant City Attorney's response. So impacting the view shed, and the Historical Commission said that it did not. That bears on the height of the wall in
The-
relation to the architecture of this?
I'm sorry. The Historical Resources Commission did not look at this property per se.
Got you.
They looked at what the definition of a view shed was and determined that you cannot completely obstruct or block the view of the property, that you can still see the property beyond the fence.
Excuse me, sir. I know your card's in here, and you'll have a chance. I appreciate that, but in the public hearing process, if we allowed citizens to shout answers and us to respond, we would not. We'd be here all day. And again, I appreciate the importance and the passion, but we do need some order. And it's staff's opinion in this case that the proposed wall does not obstruct the view shed as the Historical Resources Commission has defined that term.
That's correct.
Okay. Thank you for that sidebar. Ed Marashi. Welcome, sir.
Hi. My name's Ed Marashi. I live at 2139 North Flower Street, right around the corner from the house that's in question. Just to disclose, I am president of the Neighborhood Floral Park Association. I also am a Historic Resource Commissioner. As far as the presidency, the city did not contact myself regarding this property or anything else. We did talk about it in several emails and communications at the board meeting, and it was decided that the neighborhood association would not take a point because we are a neighborhood association, not a homeowners association. So we don't want to get into issues regarding neighborhoods and what they could do with their home. Regarding the Historic Resource Commission, you're right, this property was not brought in front of the Historic Resource Commission. Instead, the definition, which I'll talk about in a minute, was clarified for future properties. Okay, so we already here know what the municipal code says, and that's what we should be judging this by, is what is the code? And also, the city gives a lot of guidelines as to what to do with that code and what kind of fencing to put in or not. So we know that, and we're looking to go against that. Okay, well, let's talk about the neighborhood. So the neighborhood, as you see, has wide, expansive yards. We know that. So when you look down the street, you just see home after home after home, beautiful home. And that's probably one of the main reasons that in 2005, the Neighborhood USA Association judged Floral Park as the Neighborhood of the Year award for the whole United States, 2005. There it is on record. That's because of the way the neighborhood looks. And like as Gene says, our home tours are a big draw because people want to see the homes. Okay, let's talk about the historical significance. So yes, this property is on the historical registry, and it does have the Mills Act. And what does the Mills Act say? So when you sign it, it says, a view corridor enabling the general public to see the historic property from the public right-of-way shall be maintained, and owners shall not be permitted to block the view corridor of the historic property with any new structure such as walls, fences, shrubbery, or so to prevent the viewing of the historic property by the public. What we did in the Historic Resource Commission was clarify that, because Holly wanted to know, well, if we blocked 5%, 10%, 15%, what's a fair percentage? And we as the commissioners came back and said, well, and what the city recommended us to say was that the historical features that are mentioned in the document when you describe the home, those are the key features that need to be seen from the public viewing, so from the sidewalk. And we added, okay, we agree with that, but we also want to throw in there shrubbery and other things, can't block that view also. That's what we did as a Historical Resource Commission. But the property itself was not brought in front of us. I expect it'll go in front of the Planning Commission. Okay, next.
If you could summarize.
Sure. Oh, okay. Again, looking at the height and everything else, you are blocking, by your own pictures, you're blocking the whole front porch, the whole staircase leading up into the home and everything else. So you are blocking a lot of that home. And this home, you know, Mike has lived in the neighborhood before. So this isn't the first time he's there, so he knows what kind of neighborhood it is. He knows what he was buying into and what he may not be able to change. So again, I think that this is significant and should not be allowed. I'm fully against it.
Thank you, sir. I do have one question.
Sure, absolutely.
Again, the difference between the 3 and the 5 foot wall.
Yes.
Depending on your vantage point, 3 foot wall, which is promoted by right, would still block some of the visual features of the facade.
A 3-foot wall?
I'm asking. I mean,
Oh, I know.
Depending
If I'm
on
standing here,
depending on distance. I mean,
Right.
certainly if you're standing on the edge of the property line, there's a difference.
I'm just saying, I'm standing on the sidewalk. You're saying the fence is 4 feet away, and it's 3 feet high. And there's some dispute whether the home is 2 feet or 3 feet above that. Obviously, I can see the entire home, all the walkway, all the planters that are up on the railing, the whole 9 yards. I can see it all. But now 5 foot, because the height of the standard American woman, for example, is 4 feet 11.7 inches and 5 feet 4.8 inches for a male. If I'm female, I can't. If I'm looking at that fence line, I've got to see something that is above that.
Okay.
And so I am blocking it. And again, your own pictures show that you will be blocking the whole porch area.
Great.
That's your own drawing.
Sir, can you
Yes.
leave copies of the documents
Absolutely.
you referenced for the record? That would
Yep.
be helpful.
Certainly.
Thank you, sir.
You're welcome.
I'll just note for the record, I've been handed 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 12 sheets of paper consisting of photographs of the current state of the property, the height specifications of males, it looks like, and potentially individuals, as long as some Mills Act information and some information pertaining to the listing of the property at issue and the historical resources. Thank you, sir. Before I forget on the issue, I'd like to ask staff, the size of the existing backyard. The staff report references 800 feet. It looks like from the aerial view and the materials, there's a pool in the backyard. I'm wondering, the size compared to other lots in the area.
I don't have the exact dimensions of this backyard right here, but these yards here in Flora Park are larger. These are some of our biggest lots in Santa Ana. So they do vary in size, but this one is more likely smaller than other backyards.
Resulting from the
Placement of the
house
house and
being
garage.
set back from
Right.
the public right away.
Right. I'd have to look at an aerial map in order to be more definitive.
No, that's sufficient. Thank you. Lazzolo Bino? Laszlo, yes. That's your fault for your writing, sir, not mine.
Yeah, my writing is bad. I'll admit to that one. So
Welcome, please.
I'm surprised you got it as good as you did. I've lived in Flora Park for about 5 years now. And the reason I moved into Flora Park is because of the openness, a lot of people walking around, very friendly environment, and that's something that I was looking for. The fence that you're proposing to put around one of the most beautiful houses in that neighborhood is just going to block the view for a lot of people. My wife's in a wheelchair. I do a lot of bike riding in the neighborhood. She does a lot of walking. She walks her dog in the neighborhood very frequently. And that's just going to cut down her view. She's not going to be able to enjoy that house. It's not just that house, but also when I'm walking down or bicycling down the street on that picture, that's going to cut out my view of the houses across the street from me as I'm going around the corner. I mean, it's going to impact, our enjoyment of the neighborhood. It's just, if your house does this, what about the other houses that decide, well, you can put a fence up, well, why shouldn't I be able to put a fence up? And with the Mills Act being, stating that we should be able to see that house, if it's a historic home, I mean, it's just kind of taken away from it. I'm firmly against this thing. I don't think it should be done. I think it's going to reduce my enjoyment of the neighborhood, or other residents' enjoyment of the neighborhood, and people that are just coming through the neighborhood to see what a beautiful place it really is, because it really is a good neighborhood. It's beautiful. That's really all I have to say.
Thank you, sir, for your comments. Okay, next is Nancy Gallivan. Welcome.
Thank you. My name is Nancy Gallivan, and I live next door to the Nest property. And my husband and I are the ones that are going to be boxed in. 2 walls on either side of it, 5 feet tall or more. Surely this isn't not what Floral Park symbolizes.
If I can interrupt you briefly, you said next door. Which
I live at 1912.
Okay, so that if you're looking
I'm immediately adjacent north
Gotcha.
to their property.
Okay.
I want to show you 2 pictures. This is how the view looks standing. This is my home. This is standing slightly north, looking down the street at all of the open yards. Dr. Garza's is here. I can't remember their name there. Joe Dunn, our former senator, is there. Here's our home, and this is the Nest property. It's lovely, it's open, you can see the entire corner. When you drive in and out, you have an unobstructed view. There's no problem with traffic or whatever that may, present itself. Then I want to show you another picture of, although this is not currently relevant, this is what a 6-foot wall looks like, 4-foot setback from the property line on the Nest property. This was there, and it is now currently gone, which we're very happy. The line I drew here is this is a 6-foot wall. This is a 5-foot line here, which I drew in exactly as 5 feet would be. And you can see that the property is not visible. I don't care what they say. An artist's rendering is gorgeous. I've seen many artistic renderings of properties, and they all look beautiful, but somehow it's not exactly what it looks like when it's implemented. Now, we've lived happily next door to this property for 52 years. I've raised 7 children there, and we moved in when the original owners, builders, were still living there. That's Dr. and Mrs. Elliott. We knew them for maybe 15 years before Mrs. Elliott died, and they were very proud of their beautiful open yard and gardens. In fact, Dr. Elliott and I often talked about his rose bushes along the front and his not too well-grown azaleas in the pots. These were very difficult. They didn't have drip irrigation in those days. But I'm not going to talk about the Mills Act. People have covered that. Floral Park is always symbolized to us, and I get very emotional. I'm sorry. A bit of old-fashioned Main Street America, comprised of distinctive individually built homes, and we have people of every race, culture, income, property, income levels, from everything from doctors, lawyers, to hotel owners and policemen live in our Floral Park area.
I'm sorry to interrupt. If you could summarize your comments.
Okay. We don't want to create a hostile environment with our neighbors, and we hope to live peacefully in this open ambience of Floral Park for our remaining years. Please do not put up any type of a wall. Even if it's acceptable for 3 feet, the property would not be enhanced by any type of a structure. Thank you.
Thank you. Next is, I'm going to give the first name a shot, Jamie. Looks like Samagami. Oh, yes, thank you.
For you to look at.
Thank you.
It'll give you a better idea of the area. The record, please.
The address number on this request is 2012. I won't read the street out loud. Is there somebody in the audience that?
2012, what street? What street?
Oh, Jeannie, she left. It's Jeannie.
Jeannie?
She lives on Greeley.
Joni Barr or Tom Barr? Somebody with the middle name Barr?
Oh, they're here.
Okay. Oh, got you. Joni. Very good. Thank you.
My name is Joni Marie Barr Samoji, and I live at 2012 North Heliotrope Drive, Santa Ana, and I have lived there since 1974. My husband and I highly urge you to approve and make an exemption for this proposed wall height at 1904 North Heliotrope Drive. The design is simply beautiful. It will be equated to a gorgeous piece of artwork and add to the enhancement of the corner of Heliotrope and 19th Street and to the entire Floral Park neighborhood. It is also an enhancement to this beautiful, gorgeous, historic home, as the design has been well researched and is historically, architecturally correct. Because of the elevation of the home, this beautiful wall will not block the home's frontal view from the corner of 19th and Heliotrope. Another aspect to be well aware of is that we own property on 19th Street also. And it is a heavily, heavily traveled street in Floral Park. Owning property that faces 19th Street, we are well aware of the tremendous negative impact the traffic has on 19th Street, to the quality of life and to the privacy of its residents. And my dear Lord, 1904 is right at that very, very corner, which is more reason for this height limitation to be exempt. I would also like to show you a fence that was put up about 10 years ago, 10 years ago, honey? Right next door to us. Without a permit, it violates every single policy that the city had. We wrote to everyone. Our letters were totally ignored. This woman had so much influence with the city. Well, we finally called for a meeting with the city and a stenographer that we hired to meet at our home to discuss this matter. Everyone agreed to it. 3 days before the meeting, the city canceled. Fortunately, with the grace of God, a new owner has purchased this property. The height of the hedge of 6 feet has been cut down, and this wall will be taken down. But that is what somebody with influence can do, and with these people wanting to build this beautiful piece of artwork, to ignore that would be just a shame.
Thank you, ma'am. If you could summarize your comments.
I did.
Perfect. And if you would be willing to leave the photos with us.
Certainly.
Thank you so much. Next speaker is Alberta Christie.
Hi, I'm Alberta Christie, former councilwoman for Santa Ana, neighborhood association leader for Valley Adams Neighborhood, Centennial Park Neighborhood Association, and chair of the Historic Resource Commission. One of the things we want to add to that Mills Act, our commission added landscaping. You forgot to bring that up. To some of the things that should not, with the fences, the walls, and so forth, the shrubbery, landscaping is included in that as of our last meeting. Councilwoman Lisa Biss and I co-chaired during our term on the council the NICE Committee, Neighborhood Improvement Code Enforcement. We gave an order to staff to survey all the fences and landscaping throughout the city. Vince, you were on that. Bernie, you were on that. It was bad and ugly. I mean, we have things that look like prison. So what we wanted to do was to craft a standard that everyone in the city would comply to. Okay? And that's exactly what we did with the 3 feet. No matter where you lived in the city, no matter who you were in the city, it was equally applied. People came in at the counter, wanted to do more than 3 feet. They were denied, and guess what? They complied. We have beautiful 3 feet through fences throughout, the new ones on here. You have to look at this just not as a historic property, what the precedents you're now setting for the entire city. How do you justify someone from my neighborhood association being denied and told 3 feet? And yet you go north of 17th Street, okay, once again, them against us, you coming in and now recommending approval of this variance. Where's the fairness? Maharaja House has been open for many years, no fences. And we all know that his daughter was under kidnapping threats and assassination. So what are you talking about privacy here? Okay? So you're now going to set a tide of outrage throughout this entire city for those that complied, that came before our committee and wanted this in place to make Santa Ana unified and beautiful and change and helping to improve the image. Even Orange Historical District, the entire historical district is at 42 inches, which is the entire city ordinance. So once again, to prepare that. So I just want to bring to your attention that you're now setting a precedent that is going to come back like viciousness, and all the neighborhoods in all Santa Ana are coming at you if you approve this variance. Okay? Thank you so much.
Jeffrey Katz, followed by William Galvin. Mr. Katz?
Thank you. I may refer to a couple pictures in this, Mr. Cardinale, so I just want to hand it off to you for the record. My name is Jeffrey Katz. I live at 1919 North Heliotrope, just a few houses down from the subject property and a few houses down from it. I want to focus my comments on some of the intangible aspects here. We've heard a lot about architectural and code, but let me first begin with some intangibles. My wife was hospitalized December 15th, 2016. December 28th, she was diagnosed with a pretty aggressive, severe cancer. And she remained in the hospital for 70 straight days and nights. And I raise this story, and I begin with that story for two reasons. My first point that I'd like to make is, over the course of those 70 days, over 30 neighbors came to visit my wife in the hospital, and she was hospitalized at USC more than 20 miles away. Every day, there were anywhere from 2 to 3 neighbors, different neighbors, coming to our home, taking a key that was hidden there to go and walk our dogs. When we got out of the hospital, the neighborhood arranged for dinners for us for the next 50 nights. Women would come, spend time with my wife when she was home, so she was not left alone, so I can go to work, try to catch on a little bit of work that I missed because I was in the hospital with my wife for those 70 days. I want to give you a bit of a glimpse into what Floral Park is by saying that. The second point I want to make is across the street from us at 1919 North Heliotrope is 1920, and I'm going to show you a picture of that in just a moment. The neighbors that live there are wonderful people. Wonderful people. And yet, 3.5 months lapsed, and they did not know that my wife was in the hospital. Why? Because there's a 6-foot wall that surrounds that house. Over 100 neighbors came to our support during this time, but yet a wall separated us and our neighbors directly across the street, and they were oblivious to the fact that my wife was suffering from cancer and that we weren't there. And it's an intangible, but it's an intangible that I don't think is lost on the city of Santa Ana. And I'm going to read to you from the housing element of the Santa Ana General Plan. It says, the city of Santa Ana has a rich mosaic of neighborhoods distinguished by their history, architecture, housing types, and amenities. It goes on to list a number of those neighborhoods, including Washington Square and Floral Park. It goes on, rich in history and culture, Santa Ana's neighborhoods are more than simply collections of housing. In fact, our neighborhoods are the fundamental building blocks of the community. They profoundly define the quality of life experienced. Neighborhoods are where residents feel safe, where friendships and social ties develop, and where people identify with their community. Ultimately, neighborhoods are home. Therefore, the design and maintenance of neighborhoods are critical to the quality of life. That citation appears on page 2 of the exhibit I gave you, and below that I cite from an article which was published by the Las Vegas Sun in 2010. It was addressing a neighborhood where there were block walls, and there's a cite in there from a neighborhood urban planner. And the article reads, the resulting valley streetscape, block wall, sidewalk, street, has been criticized as monotonous, unwelcoming to pedestrians, and antithetical to community. Quote from Robert Fielder, the urban planner, this is one of the things we have built into the community that has kept us from developing a sense of community.
If you could summarize your comments, sir.
Well, I'm 55 years old. I've lived in many communities in Orange County, New York, San Francisco. This place is unique. Mr. Cardinelli, you haven't been there. I'll show you pictures of this place. It won't do it justice. To really understand this community, you need to be there and walk there and know the people. It is a jewel in Orange County. Walls create silos. I really like Mike and I really like Christine, and I love the design of this. I fear what walls will do. And I've given you a couple of pictures. I asked you to turn just quickly to Exhibit 1 and 2, which is Santa Clara. Beautiful homes on Santa Clara. But if you go just 100 feet from these homes, look at Exhibit 3. 8-foot wall filled with landscaping. You can't even see the house that's behind that. When you walk on that street, it is an absolute dead zone. Nobody walks there. It's horrible. I want you to turn, if you don't mind.
Thank you, sir. I've been quite lenient with your time. So,
let me a final thought. Look, I understand when I hate being to tell an individual what they can and can't do, but when you become part of a whole, willingly or unwillingly, you give up some of those rights. The rights of the community do have a right. There is an unwritten code that must be maintained in order for us to maintain this sense of community. There's a written code that says 3 feet, but I'm asking that the unwritten code that honors history, that honors the values that come from history, be maintained. I'm fine with this wall being built, but tell me, what are we going to do to make sure more walls are not built? Because the application of the code by the city is horrible. Because they simply said it's not by...
I need you to...
All right.
To wrap up. Thank you. And I do have copies of your handout. Thank you. William Galvan, and then Michael Galvan.
I have a different perspective. I'm a retired OBGYN and delivered thousands of babies, many of them in Santa Ana, and many of them in my own neighborhood. What gets me and has not been discussed is that in this country, over 50 children are backed over by cars every week. 50 children. 2 or 3 of those children every week die because they're run over from a driveway because they can't see. I have a Chevy, and it probably has, they call the rear end where in all cars, there's a certain perspective where you cannot see. You look out the mirror, and it can go up to 30 feet. Now, our neighbor wants to put a 5-foot wall 4 feet away from my driveway, and then another 5-foot wall around. It just scares the heck out of me to think that I could run over some child, and the majority of people run over and kill our children under 5. To me, it's a safety issue, and I agree with all the other things were said, but I particularly worry in my own driveway. I'm careful, I look around, everybody does this, but you have blind spots on your automobiles, especially on my Tahoe, which sits in the driveway. And now we're going to have a 5-foot fence on the side and here. And what do we see in our neighborhood? We see plenty of children coming into the neighborhood, people walking their dogs. I mean, it's just a whole new neighborhood where the old people like me have been in my home for 52 years. The young people are coming in, and they're all over the place, and they're walking on sidewalks, they're on skateboards. It would just terrify me if I ran over somebody, and I would feel that the city of Santa Ana would feel badly too, if by ignoring safety laws, 3-foot fence, 10 feet away from my driveway or the property line, not 4 feet, it just isn't enough. And when that temporary fence that we had up, it just used to drive me crazy trying to back out. Anyway, that is my perspective. I am for the children that are run over by cars. I'd like to prevent it.
Thank you very much, sir. And then Michael Galvin.
Hello, my name is Michael Gallivan. I was one of Nancy and Bill's kids raised in the house, and have kids today, and we go and visit, so what my dad says about the safety is very important. It seems to me, forgive me, but the fix is in with this recommendations from the staff. Many of the items in your staff report are factually incorrect. The grade of that lot is flat. Maybe 6 inches in the balustrades, the Italian balustrades sit 2 feet up on a terrace. So that wall will take away all view quarters of the significant, in the historical landmark, it says that the balustrades are very significant. You're not going to see those anymore. Those are probably one of the most authentic features that you have in the house. The backyard, I understand that one of the reasons, rationale for this approval of this is that you want to have private enjoyment. I'm all for property rights. I've never spoken against anyone having not the right to do what they want with their property. That backyard is 3,000 feet, not 800 feet as referenced in your report. That's a 375% difference. So I don't, I apologize to the planning commission. I don't think you have been out to the house, but if you measure that, it's significantly big, and it's a lot bigger than a lot of the homes. The third is historical view shed. You're not going to see any of the historicals. If you look at the historical designation of the house, it lists the Italian balustrades as being very, very significant, probably the most. You're not going to see those anymore from the street. You are absolutely not, especially from the street, which is down a foot. My father talked about the safety. On security, the applicant wants a 5-foot wall. A 3-foot wall you can see, and if you talk to security experts, if you put a 5-foot wall, someone can hop over that wall and you're not going to be able to see. So it doesn't make the house safer. I actually think it does the opposite. I understand that the owner has a history, from my understanding, of he owns several properties. He's owned maybe 4 or 5. with his partner, and I think they may own the property separately, so you have a history of doing flips, building and flipping. So I don't know how long he's going to be here. I have no idea, but I think you should take that into consideration. But given that much of the staff report is just not correct, I would encourage you to look further into this, because a lot of things are just not correct in that report. So I would ask you to deny this, and I'd at least look into these matters, because I think they'll be eye-opening. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. And that does conclude the speaker cards that I have. Is there anybody in the audience that has not already spoken or submitted a speaker card that would like to comment?
And real quick, I gave you this report? Did all the members get it? And I highlighted all the items line by line that are not correct in the report, and I corrected them and I distributed them.
Correct. I have the copy that was distributed by staff, as well as the copy you handed me this morning.
Thank you.
Thank you. So again, anybody else in the audience that has not already spoken or submitted a speaker card that would like to speak on this matter? Okay, seeing none, I'll close the public hearing. Find my script in the mess of documents here. Oh, I'm sorry, yes.
May I make one quick comment or not?
How? If you come up to the podium, I will reopen the public hearing for you.
I'm sorry.
And a quick comment.
Many people commented to me that they would like to be here today, but they are full-time employed and could not take time off from work to attend a morning 10:30 meeting. They were opposed, the ones who contacted me, and some of them even reluctantly did not want to get involved with City Hall. You know how it is. But they were opposed. Thank you.
Thank you for that. And again, I'll reclose the public hearing. I do have a few quick questions, and seeing that we're reaching the noon time hour, I'll be brief. This is for staff. I didn't notice, and maybe I missed it, or maybe there aren't any conditions of approval for the variance. I noticed that staff has to approve the final design, but for example, in some cases, the actual design specs are attached to the approval, or perhaps the issue was raised about a graffiti abatement requirement. I assume the property owner would be fine with that.
You are correct. There are no conditions of approval attached to the recommendation, and graffiti mitigation is a code requirement.
Okay.
So you can't pass
So
a
it
code
would be
7 years ago.
redundant, in your
Yes.
opinion, to have it in there?
Yes. Anti-graffiti measures are mandatory.
And staff's mechanism, each community does it differently for ensuring. I've been provided some renderings. So should I approve the application, some sort of assurance that this is what we're going to get?
That's correct. And our recommendation, part of the resolution here talks about the exhibits attached and the staff reported part of it. So whatever's called out as far as materials, for example, as far as the fence materials in the staff report would be applicable to the actual fence. When they come in for a permit, we're going to compare the plans here with what they turn in for the construction drawings to make sure that they're compliant.
And I'll ask the question to the applicant. This is, if your application is approved, this is accurate of what you're trying to do, in addition to the plans that were included. Okay.
There will not be very much of the wall exposed. It's a computer-generated landscaping just to simulate, but we don't want much of that wall to even be shown. There'd be climbing figs and planting and lighting and to discourage graffiti.
Okay. A few more quick questions for the applicant. There's been differing testimonies to the size of the backyard. I don't need a square foot exactness.
I can explain. There's a structure that was built in 41, maybe was a pool house at some point, which takes up a third of the yard. Right now we use it for storage. There's a small patch of grass. There's a pool and there's a walkway. No zones. There's really no zones to hang out or because of that structure.
So you're representing that the usable space in that backyard
also fenced off the
is
pool
limited.
so the dogs can't get to it, and it's tight, and
Very good. And this might be a question for your design consultant. We've talked about how the 3-foot wall is permitted by right. Anything higher requires a variance. In your opinion, is 5 feet tall the shortest it can be and maintain the integrity of the structure? For example, would 4.5 feet still satisfy the visual component?
That was our, after a long time of looking at different things. And can I just add in response to some
Please.
of the things they said really quickly? In terms of viewing the entrance and the balustrade, first of all, thank you for everyone's opinion, because it's an amazing neighborhood and nobody wants to change that. But things like the entrance, there's a very open iron gate. It's actually a 1920s gate that's from the same period, late 20s, early 30s iron gate that we've chosen. That's very open and spans the entire pathway to the door, so that you can see that the curved staircase that goes up to the elevated entrance. So there are points that where smaller than 5, where you would be able to view the house. Again, the 5 feet was chosen mainly to follow that line of the balustrade, and it is true, it comes just to that line, so you would not technically see that from if you're right up against the wall. This is a photo from the 30s, around the time that the early 30s, when the house was built, of the house. And though, like I said, there's no wall, much of the house is obscured. And I'm not saying that this is the intention or that that's why that makes this okay, but it is not so that the neighborhood has always been a flat, open lawn, and that's historically accurate and in keeping with the neighborhood. This is, as you can see, the balustrades are very only slightly visible. So, just to make that point, but in answer to your question,
again, and maybe I should phrase it this way: it's your application.
Yes.
If you're applying for a 5-foot wall, then I'll consider the application on the 5-foot wall. If you would be satisfied with something shorter, and staff is good with it, I'm happy to consider that too. So,
hey, we're not unreasonable. I mean, if you came up with a compromise of 4.5, I think that might show a little bit more. I don't know. I mean, it just depends where you're standing too. I mean,
I noted that earlier. Point of reference could be a factor. And, one final question. Your desire for the height of the wall. We've talked about the architectural features, and the staff report mentions privacy and usability of the area in light of the backyard size. Is
the
there anything
majority
else?
of the land is in the front yard.
Right. Yeah. Is there anything else that,
just
as far as purpose,
it's
you'd
kind
like
of
to...
dog proofing, so the dogs can't get out and run out onto 19th and get hit. It's eventually we'll have grandkids who want to play in the yard, and we just kind of choose to do that behind a wall. It's kind of like some people like that, some people don't.
Thank you.
Can I just
please.
make one point too? I am Mike's wife. I'm not his partner, and we have 2 boys, and we have dogs, and we have poured tons of money into this house, and it would be the worst flip in the world. So I just want to assure you, this is not a flip.
Well, we're not in that business.
No, we are not. Every house we've owned, we've restored, or the last house we owned, we spent 2 years restoring it and putting lots of money into it and losing. We usually lose money on historic properties because we are so meticulous and we care so much about them. So I just want to assure you that it is definitely not a flip. And we love the neighborhood too. And I just want everyone to know that we do care so much about it, and I do hear your points. And if we weren't on a corner, we wouldn't even feel the need to do it. We were on Ross. We raised our boys in that house there, and it just was it's just a different feeling being in the middle of the street than on a very exposed, very busy corner.
Thank you. And then a final question for staff on the, referring this to the Historic Resources Commission. I'm not saying it should have been. I'm asking why staff elected not to go that route.
We did not refer this item to the Historic Resources Committee. We knew that we had this application coming through at the time, and we knew that it had a Mills Act contract. And we did not know what the parameters of a view shed were, and so we asked for clarification and on that to determine whether or not, if we approved this minor exception, whether or not it would be in violation of the Mills Act contract, so that we could inform them, as the property owners, the implications of a violation.
And if I may further clarify, also, Canada's absolutely right on that view shed in the Mills Act part. The other part is that walls and fences are under the domain of the Planning Commission. Sure. And since this is considered a minor exception use, it goes under the zoning administrator. So we don't send it to multiple commissions. It's one.
So to summarize, and this might not be technically legally accurate, but the proposal doesn't significantly degrade the historical features of the house in light of the commission's definition of view shedding, or I'm sorry, what's the term?
View shed?
Yeah, view shed.
Yes, that's correct.
Okay, very good. Okay, any final words the applicant would like to, any closing?
I just want to say, I want to see this house. I don't want to hide it. I drive the street, and I'm very proud of it. We've spent a year designing this. We've driven up to Pasadena, taking pictures of old houses, and really try to be sensitive and authentic. I want that wall to look like it was built when the house was built, and I love the neighborhood. I'm associated with a lot of these people in here today. Even in the heated, controversy, we remained, cordial and friendly, and it's just one of those things. It's we don't agree on it, but we do not want to hide the house. By the time this is done and the house is landscaped and lit up at night, I don't think people are going to be looking at the wall or the balustrades. They're going to be looking at the lines, the skyline, and the arches and the other beautiful elements that are still showing of this house. So that's all.
Great. Thank you, sir. Procedural question for the city attorney. My understanding, and I confirm this with staff, is I have three options: to deny, grant, or refer this matter to the Planning Commission if I deem it of significant importance, so to speak. And I certainly appreciate staff's proposed findings. I'd like to make sure that my written decision, whatever it may be, incorporates the materials that have been presented today. I prefer not to continue this proceeding for 2 weeks until we have a new regular meeting. And the code, at least in my view, is somewhat unclear. It says I have to issue a written decision, but it doesn't say the timing for doing so.
There's no time frame in the code.
Okay. So, in your opinion, would it be procedurally okay to continue the matter until I issue my written decision, which I anticipate issuing before the end of this week? And in doing that, would that limit my options, for example, to refer it to the Planning Commission? Because the reading of the code indicates that I can continue the hearing to the Planning Commission. So I don't know if that contemplates, new noticing or what have you, but, I'd like a little bit more time, but I don't want to kick it out for all parties involved for another 2 weeks.
Do you want us to have a special meeting? Or did you want to issue your decision separately?
That's your preference.
From a procedural standpoint, we will, if this goes to planning commission, it will be noticed.
It will be renoticed. Okay. So it sounds to me like I can continue this matter until I issue my final decision, which will start the date, and maybe we have a special meeting to formally adopt and announce it, if that's what staff wants to do. But I mean, I don't think the code requires that. I just want to make sure these fine people are aware of whatever the outcome is.
We've never taken a written decision previously separately. Yeah.
Okay. So your practice is, for example, now I would issue my decision and make any additions to staff's proposal, or
we've had the hearing officer announce his decision at the meeting, and then you also, of course, could take the time to render your written decision.
Okay. Yeah. Okay.
And after you render your written decision, that starts the 10-day appeal period.
Right.
If you are uncomfortable, you may continue it for 1 week, say. We've had that as well.
Yeah. I want to be sensitive to applicants' timing. Would that cause a hardship on you if we were to continue it for a week? Is staff comfortable with that? Again, a lot of material was presented today, so I want to give it its due consideration.
Absolutely. Do you maybe want to continue to later in the day to allow people to accommodate schedules? I mean, that's up to you as well.
I don't know if
it should be a brief meeting, I would imagine.
I don't know if, and again, the city attorney, I hate to put you on the spot because I hate when people do it to me. I don't know if there's a requirement.
There's no set date or time. Just by practice, we have it.
So the hearings have to be held at a regularly scheduled meeting, but I can continue it to whatever date is appropriate. Oh. Okay. 5/17. Okay. Now, I think to be consistent with the rules, my preference, and I won't take any further testimony. The public hearing portion will be closed. It'll just be a matter of me rendering my decision and stating any grounds, which again will be stated in the decision.
So it will not be a public hearing?
No public hearing. I've heard plenty, and again, I appreciate everybody's time, especially in the middle of a workday. But if, again, close the public hearing, but continue the item to render the decision to May 17th at the same time. Does that work for staff and the applicant? Okay.
Take your time.
Thank you. So I guess, again, your procedure, I can, with that item continued to 5/17 at 10:30 a.m., we'll now move on to public comments. Does any member of the public have any public comments on non-agenda items? Anybody in the audience here for just general comments? Again, not anything that we've discussed here this morning. Okay, seeing none. Would you prefer I continue to an adjourned meeting or just adjourn the meeting and, okay, meeting adjourned.
Excuse me, if you have a parking validation, we have them right here. If you want to come by and turn in your tickets, we'll go ahead and get you validated. Everybody here.
Thank you all. Thank you. Everything you're willing to leave? Oh yeah. Do you need me to leave it?
No, I'm at the next meeting.
I got that.
Yeah.
perception. And, you know, that might, you know, what staff's recommendation. I certainly appreciate the recommended height. I just, you know, sometimes a slight concession can be public. Well, it's clearly you've lived in the neighborhood for years. So, it's a beautiful property.
It is.
Thank you. Hello. Yes, sir.
Have you driven here?
I have before, but it's been a while.
Well, I suggest before you make your decision, you drive again. Do you want?
Yeah. Well, no, I'm not mad at you. I'm just wondering why it didn't bother everybody else. But there was a lot of. If no one else brought it up, money. Yeah.